This morning, a Muslim family is looking for answers after an airline kicked them off of a flight. The 9 Muslim passengers, including 3 children, were heading from D.C. to a religious retreat in Florida. When other passengers on that AirTran flight apparently became worried about a conversation they say they overheard about the safest place to sit. When the FBI gave them the all clear, the airline still didn't let them back on. Joining us with more on the story from Orlando is Kashif and Atif Irfan, 2 brothers who were banned from the flight. Gentlemen, so thanks so much for your time.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. So first and foremost, tell me about this conversation you were having as you were boarding the plane, just getting to your seat.
Sure. The conversation happened between my wife, myself, and my sister-in-law. We were, as we're walking on the plane, discussing, our seat placement, where we were sitting, and where the safest place to sit on an airline usually, or on an airplane usually is. I was always told it was near the wings, and my sister-in-law had heard something different. And I guess from that conversation and describing what we were looking for, someone had, gleaned the idea that we were, plotting something or trying to do something to the plane.
So, Kashif, did you notice when someone overheard that conversation and asked a flight attendant for guidance or asked for help?
No, I didn't notice anything like that at all. The only thing that I had noticed was there was an agent that had come up to my brother and showed him his badge and took him off the plane along with his wife. But prior to that, I had no indication that anything was going on.
You're watching your brother and his wife being taken off the plane. What are you thinking? What are you doing at that point?
Well, I was panicking, but I was still pretty calm and, essentially stayed in my seat. I was extremely nervous and worried. At that point, I did not know what to expect because no one could give us any answers. After several minutes, we were told there was a security situation, that there might be a breach of security on the plane. That got me even more worried. Of course, I had children on this plane as well as my teenage sister-in-law. When we were also escorted off the plane afterwards, it was disclosed to us that someone had overheard some conversation. I very readily remember the time spent boarding and the time spent sitting in the pre-boarding area. There was no discussion of bombs, of terrorists, of anything of the sort that would lead any of us to believe that anyone else would pose a security threat had we heard it.
Atif, I know the FBI cleared you, so what was it like for both of you to be escorted off of a plane knowing you did nothing wrong? And of course, everybody is there watching this all take place.
Exactly, and I think really that's sort of the big issue here, that we really, especially my wife and myself, because we were the first ones taken off the plane, we were the ones that were questioned by the FBI, we really felt, disrespected. As Americans, we felt that, living in this country, we shouldn't have to deal with this kind of stuff. That, unfortunately, we were lumped in with everybody else and treated like second-class citizens.
Now, I do want to, of course, state some of the basics of this story, some of the nuggets of the story. You were flying from D.C. to Orlando with family, planning to attend a conference. You were on an AirTran flight leaving on Thursday in the afternoon hours. Now, AirTran has issued this statement. AirTran Airways complied with all TSA, law enforcement, and Homeland Security directives and had no discretion in the matter. That is a company statement. What is your response to what AirTran is saying today?
Well, for me, I know for a fact that the FBI agents, after they had cleared us of any wrongdoing, and by us I mean all 9 of the passengers involved, which included my brother, myself, our families, and a friend of ours who happened to be on the same flight, going to the same place, who didn't even come to the airport along with us. The FBI had cleared all of us. In fact, they hadn't even questioned my family and myself, only my brother and his wife. So once we were cleared, we were expected to reboard either the plane or be booked on the next flight out by AirTran. However, AirTran at that point refused. They also further refused to let us on any subsequent flights that were going to leave the next day or the following weekend, saying that the security issue had not been resolved yet, despite the fact that the FBI assured us that we represent no threat whatsoever and that this was essentially a horrible mistake.
Now, Atif, I believe you're an attorney, you're a tax attorney. You're considering pursuing legal action, but you're not after money.
We're not after money, to be honest. What we really feel the big issue here, too, is twofold. That, we felt, treated very badly, that we were sort of paraded out in front of everybody else, like these are the people that are possibly trying to blow up your plane. I got look after look, and, being a Muslim American, I'm sort of used to a lot of that kind of stuff. But when it's directly put in your face and these federal marshals come on, and basically it felt like they were arresting me, despite the fact that they treated us well, in front of everybody else. We felt like the guilty party after doing pretty much nothing at all.
My children and I were also quarantined in one section of the pre-boarding area, surrounded by armed guards, and we were also told that we couldn't get food for our children who had been involved in this now for about 2 to 3 hours. One of my children was also in diapers, and we couldn't access the diapers in the bag to change him. So essentially, we felt like the guilty verdict had already been drawn, and quite frankly, the treatment from the FBI and the air marshals was fairly good, particularly the FBI, who actually helped us to reboard a different plane, a different flight from a different part of the airport. On the other hand, the treatment by AirTran personnel was absolutely egregious. In fact, I think my brother overheard the pilot stating to some of the other TSA personnel that, whoa, it's a good thing that those girls caught those guys. And, like my brother said, I mean, being Americans, being in this country, being productive members of this community who have never had any sort of blemish upon our civil records, it's extremely insulting, very humiliating. And in fact, in some point, I know that my wife was in near tears, and my 7-year-old could certainly perceive that he was being mistreated and made to feel guilty because of the way he looks and perhaps his faith.
And again, AirTran saying it complied with all TSA, law enforcement, Homeland Security directives. Also went on to say late on Thursday that you have been offered full refunds and you comply with AirTran again. Will you do so?
That's a question I guess we'd have to look a little later. To be honest, in their handling, even if they state that they followed all of what they're supposed to follow, their handling of our situation, how they dealt with us before and after, immediately, it was very disconcerting, I have to say. Whether we'll fly with them again, I don't think personally I will. I can't speak for my brother.
My concern is not really about flying with them again. My concern is that this sort of treatment should not happen to us again, nor any other families that might be profiled for their race, their religion, or any of the sort of things that probably don't have any significance whatsoever with regards to whether or not they pose a threat to the passengers on board or to themselves or anybody else.
Reflecting upon that conversation you were having, again, an innocent conversation you say you were having about where is the safest place to sit on a plane, would you do anything differently?
Again, I think just watch our words. My wife and I generally are pretty careful about that kind of stuff anyways, because we know that when we step onto a plane, most people are initially kind of looking at us with a different eye than they would other people, because my wife wears a headscarf, I have a beard, we're obviously of darker complexion. So, I guess, again, just be careful as to what we say and just hopefully, see what happens.
We do kind of stand out in a crowd, especially when the 9 of us are traveling together. We had Caucasian people, men and women, people of Indian descent, people of Pakistani descent. We also had an African American on board with us, so a racially diverse crowd looking Islamic in terms of their headscarves and clothing, traveling together. I suppose someone could look at us and certainly notice that we are different than the rest of the people on the plane, but once again, that should not lead someone to draw the conclusion that we are posing a threat to the plane, regardless of the kind of conversations we're having, unless we're saying something extremely inflamed or perhaps something which would seriously indicate that we have something on our person that would cause harm. And secondarily, even if that were the case, even if we were taken off planes, so on and so forth, the kind of humiliation, the kind of treatment that we received is probably not warranted in any situation like that. After all, no one is guilty until proven guilty. And this was the statements of simply, I believe, 1 or 2 teenage passengers. It certainly is not a conviction by any stretch of the imagination in our justice system.
Thanks so much. Kashif Irfan, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, likely to lead to so many conversations about your story, about your experience when trying to fly to Orlando.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy.